Okay, this is going to serve as a brief tutorial on how to access the SD card on the Ahsoka's Rebel hilts. So we'll start off with the Shoto. Okay, you've got two pieces that have to be undone to get to the SD card in this. The first is this Allen screw back here. So you need an Allen key for it. Undo that. And then the next is here. If you take this copper colored button here and just twist it a little bit, you'll feel it'll come loose by finger tightening. Okay, and then just unscrew the green part of it, and you'll be able to lift both of those off. They're not attached, so keep track of them, don't lose them. Okay, just set those off to the side. Take the screw out, lift the cover off. Now you can see the chassis inside of here. So you've got two spots in the chassis here that you're going to want to grab onto, and just gently be careful with it. I mean, you don't want to be too rough with it, but it'll still hold up. But one finger just inside of where the speaker holder is here, and the other back here against the edge of the chassis, and you should be able to just lift it right out. And then just flip it over, and there's your SD card. Now make sure you don't do this with the kill key out. Make sure the kill key is always in when you're doing access to the board like this. You don't want to be pulling the SD card in and out with the Saber live. So you want to make sure it's powered down. And then when you're done, you just flip it back over, line it back up with the peg here, slide it back down inside. Make sure your wires here don't get caught when you're trying to push it down in. And make sure that these recharge port wires are down below the bevel here, so that when you put your cover back on, you're not going to accidentally pinch them, okay? So then just put your cover back on like this. Put your little green and copper button back in. Screw it back into place. Okay. Put your Allen screw back in. And screw it back down. And you're done. Now, that's also the same way that you'll change out the grill on that for the sound vented grill. Okay? The only difference is you'll have to unscrew this as well, which is just twist tightened. Okay? Make sure you put them back in the same position as they were, because they won't fit. If you switch these around, they won't screw in properly. Okay? So we'll set that off to the side out of the way, and we'll move over to the main hilt. Okay? The main hand hilt is a little bit trickier. All right? You don't have to take the clip off on this one. This one, you just take off that same green and copper button, unscrew it and lift it out of the way, and then you grab this green ring that's around the recharge port and just rotate it a little bit, and it'll come undone, and then it'll thread off of the top of the recharge port, and what you'll see underneath is a small Allen screw that's there. Okay, so that's what you're going to want to undo. And unfortunately it is a different size Allen key, so I have to get that one and loosen off that screw. There, once that screws off, you'll be able to lift off the cover. Now take this one off gently, because your recharge port is still attached to this cover. So you don't want to be too rough to it, because it is still threaded to the cover. And you also don't want to grab at the end and just pull, because you might bend the plate. It's not that thick of metal, and I don't want you to bend it out of shape, because if you do, it's going to be really hard to get it straightened again. Okay, so once that's done, you can either just swing it over a little bit out of the way, which is really the easiest way to go about it, and then, or you can, you can flip it right over. I would just honestly roll it out of the way a little bit. Now there are disconnects here if you want them. You don't have to necessarily do it, but there is a disconnect here on the recharge port. Okay, and so you can unplug these if you need to pull the whole thing out of the way if you find there's not enough wire there to work with. Otherwise, it's the same process. You just pick it up like you did with the other one, flip it over, and there's your SD card access. Okay, and when you're done, this one's a little bit trickier to put back in just because of the way it's designed, the way it lays in here. You have to make sure the wires go underneath of the chassis on the recharge port end, on this end. There's a little tab here that kind of sticks out. The wires kind of have to tuck underneath of that, and that's just the way it was designed. And then that tab will slide in underneath of this ribbed bar, okay? Once that's done, make sure your switch wires are out of the way at the other end, and push that down onto the chassis or onto the post there properly. Tuck your recharge port wires back in. Put your plate back into place. Make sure you gently get this recharge port down into place. It's got to fit down inside of the chassis there a little bit, so sometimes you have to just kind of wiggle it a little bit to get it to squeeze down in. There we go. Now it's in. Put your screw back in, the little tiny screw. And snug it up. Put your recharge port button cover here back on. Snug it up. And your copper and green button on the other end. Snug those up. And you're done. And that's it.